Welcome to StartHer, the podcast dedicated to sharing stories that ignite female entrepreneurs into action. I'm Elizabeth Goede, and I'm here to fan the flame of your entrepreneurial spirit. Each week, we bring to you the inspiring stories of women trailblazers from around the world who have sparked change in their industries, powered their ideas into thriving businesses, and pioneered their way to success. So, whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, a startup enthusiast, or a seasoned business leader, join us as we delve into the journeys of these incredible women whose tales will surely ignite a spark in each one of us. My guest today has mastered the art of turning camera-shy individuals into confident, captivating presenters. I'm thrilled to welcome Stephanie Garcia, founder of Lights Camera Live and an expert in the world of digital marketing and live video strategy. Stephanie's journey is a testament to the power of women in business. With 15 years of experience in the ad agency world, she's led paid search advertising for one of the largest search agencies in the United States and served as the director of social strategy for San Diego's leading ad agency. But that was just the beginning. Now, as a certified neurolinguistic programming trainer, Stephanie is on a mission to help entrepreneurs rewire their minds for success and overcome their fears of public speaking. Her innovative approach has helped thousands of clients and students get on what she calls the fascination fast track, igniting their ideas and becoming confident on camera. Stephanie's impact is far-reaching. She's coached astronaut Jessica Meir for a live interview in space, and her client, MasterChef Claudia Sandoval, drove 178,000 downloads for her book from her first live stream within just 24 hours. And as if that wasn't enough, Stephanie's also an author, having written 2 books for Entrepreneur Press, a sought-after speaker at major industry events, and the host of her own podcast, Lights Camera Live. Welcome, Stephanie, to the StartHer podcast. I'm so excited to have you.
My friend, that was absolutely, I was like, wow, that's such an intro. Thank you so much. This is so much fun.
Yeah, it's always fun to have somebody else talk about you, right?
It's one of those things where you're reminded of like, oh yeah, I did that. Because, as an entrepreneur, you're moving from one project to the other. You're like, oh yeah.
Exactly. So, Stephanie, when I read through this bio, of course, you sort of started, and I want to just confirm this. You started your career in the agency side of things. Is that correct?
Very much. And the thing is too, is that when I first started my professional career, I actually graduated from college in psychology. And so the first job I ever had was human resources. But long story short, I was the one that would write greeting cards and hand them out to employees and say, congratulations on your work anniversary. And they were actually handmade cards that I made. And one of the VPs had said to me, Stephanie, you should sell this. And I was like, where should I sell it? They're like, have you heard of this thing called Etsy? I was like, no, I haven't. So I learned everything it was. And then from there, I was hooked with like e-commerce and selling online, that I actually went to the marketing manager because I would recruit for his team. And I said, hey, can I move from HR into marketing? And I was in marketing for probably like 60 days before that team got shut down. And like Elizabeth, I was at that point where I was like, okay, do I go back to HR where it's stable, or is this what marketing life is?
Right.
And again, since I was close to the VPs, they were very much like, Stephanie, I have this friend of mine who is launching a social media agency. If you really want to do this marketing stuff, go there. And that's really, really when I started going into more of social media and working on the agency side of that.
Yeah, I always find, after having done so many of these interviews with female entrepreneurs, none of us take a straight path, but I've known you for what, almost 20 years, and I did not know this Etsy piece.
Yeah.
This is the first time I've heard about that.
Yeah, not a lot of people know it. And it's so funny because I was always like, one of the things was I was a big, huge scrapbooker, and back in the day before Canva, friends, it was like Photoshop Elements, not like the real Photoshop suite. It was like Photoshop Elements. And I would take like my vacations from Hawaii and I would scrapbook it. And then eventually, it turned into like move from digital into like real life, crafting and stuff. And I think it actually comes out in a lot of the things that I design, the crafter side of me. It's just not a lot of people even know about that.
I love it. I love it. Well, you've got a few little secrets behind the
Yeah.
doors of Stephanie, that I'm sure we'll touch on today. So, okay, so you start, in HR. You
Mhm.
are a closet crafter and making greeting cards, and you then move into marketing, and then so then you do get into, I mean, you were when you and I met, I mean, you were like the premier social media expert at the time. And so tell me a little bit how that path worked. So your department gets shut down in marketing.
Yeah, it was like it was one of those life-changing moments. It was an alpha project that this startup tech company was launching, and they were trying to compete with YouTube. They were like, "We're gonna be bigger than YouTube." That's how early this
Right,
was. And then
right.
they started to realize like, "Oh, this is really expensive bandwidth and blah, blah, blah." So they shut down the project. And clearly remember, getting called into this office, and there was my old boss who was the HR manager, and I knew in that instant, "Oh, I'm getting laid off,"
Oh,
you
right.
know?
Yeah,
And
I know that.
so it was the classic office, where they give you like the box. You have 15 minutes to gather all your things, put it in the box. And I remember walking outside that building and I'm like, okay, Steph, what are you going to do? Right? Do you go and keep doing HR, which
Hmm.
you went to college for and you have like experience in that, right? I say that because it's like at that time I was in my early 20s and I was like, oh my God, I spent 4 years I'm like, and I decided to take that jump into marketing just because in HR, I saw the trajectory of a marketing career. And
Mm.
so I worked at this social media agency where we were doing like contests and giveaways, and the platforms was MySpace. And we were waiting for the moment when Facebook would be like open to the public because back
Right.
then it was only like college invites. And then eventually I went from one agency to the other. Like I moved from that agency because back then social media was still like the experimental budget. You get what I'm saying? Like SEO and paid search was very
Right.
much like standard in the digital marketing world. And so I had this opportunity to go to a different agency specifically focused on paid search and SEO. And I figured, okay, never want to have that experience again where I'm handed a cardboard box. And I know that social is the experimental budget. And so then I went over to this other agency and I was there for quite some time doing paid search. Client was, get this, the makers of BlackBerry, Research in Motion. Like, babe, I'm telling you all the stars.
I love it.
And I was in charge of running paid media for all of APAC, which is like Asia Pacific. And
Hmm.
I clearly remember doing like the competitor analysis of like, okay, BlackBerry, have you heard of this thing called Apple? I heard I heard rumors that they're going to be launching an iPhone. Anyway, so from that, then I went to another agency, and this time they wanted me to focus primarily on social. And I was like, that's where my heart is, because going from Etsy and
Hmm.
being in these Facebook groups and whatnot, that's when I was like, okay, now I'm going to take the combination of everything that I learned from social, SEO, and paid search, do that at this agency. And I think at that point, that's when people said, hey, can you be on our board? Can you be in our board for our marketing chapter and help us out? I was like, well, I have all these processes and systems from everything that I've done. It's just a matter of like shifting that over. And I think that's like when you and I finally met. And I was like, oh, yeah, I have that. Here's a template. Use this.
Yeah, well, in between here, or I guess maybe at the end of that agency, you end up on maternity leave, right? And is this sort of the catalyst that ends up sort of giving you your foray into becoming an entrepreneur, or how did the
Um,
leap happen from agency life to lights, camera, live? Like, what's the how?
yeah. Well, I think most people, when they are working at an agency, in the back of their minds, they're always looking to have a side hustle or side clients, because
Right,
in agency life, as you and I both know, but most people might not realize, is that if the agency loses a client, guess who's first on the chopping block? Basically, the team that
right.
was supporting it. And so the road to entrepreneurship and how I got to Lights Camera Live was, yeah, I think when I had my daughter and I was like, oh my gosh, look at this little tiny human being, and I remember her first year. I wouldn't see her because, I mean, let me say that again. So I would have to leave the house at like 6 a.m. to get to the office at a certain time because it took like 2 hours to get there. Oh my gosh, do we all remember traffic?
Oh, yeah.
It's a different world when you get to work from home. Yeah.
It is.
Like traffic is no longer a thing. But I remember it would take me like an hour and a half to get into the office. Right. And then I would work from like 8 to 5, but I'd probably stay until 6 or 7 and then be in
Right.
traffic again. And then I was like, I can't do this. And so at one point, one of my good friends who Gary Ware was like, Steph, like if you could do this for the makers of BlackBerry, like, like if you could do this for Nike Safari Clinic, you could sure as heck do this for yourself. And like I said before, I was always building different teams, whether I was volunteering for a marketing organization or I was doing this for clients and helping build their marketing teams. At that point, I said, well, I could do this.
Mm.
And it's just a matter of not just talking the talk, but walking the walk. So if you have the framework, step into it,
Right.
so do it. And that was really kind of what sparked the whole entrepreneurial path.
Yeah, I mean, I love that, and I love that that Gary was a good champion and inspirer there. Which, for anyone that knows our friend Gary, he is an incredible, inspirational, supporting human. And so you decide to leave agency life, and you decide to sort of start up Lights Camera Live. And I
Yeah.
remember, I believe I participated in your beta.
Oh
Maybe
my
when
God,
you
that's
started that.
right.
Is that
Yeah.
true? Did I?
I think you
Um,
did. Yeah.
so tell me, was the idea, like, did you already have everything fully plotted out, or was that your proof of concept when you did
That
that
was my
beta
proof
for
of
it?
concept. And so the thing was, when I left the ad agency world, I was like, okay, if I'm confident on camera, I'm sure that I could get clients because clients will be confident that I could get them results. And
Right.
so when I started live streaming, I would show people like my structure, my formats, and my templates. But really, at the end of the show, people are like, wait, how did you do that? Like, how did you do this picture in picture and all this other stuff? And then I realized people really wanted to know, how do I become better at producing my own shows?
Right.
And so my girlfriend at the time, I don't know if you know her, but her name is Jenna Sword. And she's the founder of like You Can Brand.
Okay.
And she had this whole course of, if you want to launch a course or a mastermind, the best way to do that is to launch a beta.
Mm.
And so I took everything that I learned as far as, well, how did I launch Lights Camera Live? And I was like, first of all, it's mindset. People always think Lights Camera Live is about like, ooh, lights, your key lights, your hair light. Like, no, no, no. It's really about what lights you up inside. Because if you're going to
Right.
launch a podcast or a show, how do you make sure that you're going to be consistently having something that you're passionate to talk about?
Right.
So we went through that. Yeah, you're definitely a part of the beta. And it was such a great learning experience of learning different teaching platforms, teaching styles, the anticipating what questions people would ask, but also just how do you give someone an answer to a question, but in multiple ways? Because not everyone is, you can't just say it, like they have to see it. Like they're visual learners. Some people like to have like SOPs. And so like I feel like it really prepared me just to be like a better educator at that point.
Mhm.
Not just someone who says like, oh, hey, look at this cool thing I did, but
Yeah.
let me now transfer that knowledge to you in such a way that you could use it in your business.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember when you did that, there were some really, really successful shows that came out of that beta. And I think I, I did it because I just wanted to support you and what you were doing. And I had no idea. Like, I almost wish that like I'd known I was going to do this show back then, because I think I would have been so much further ahead. But we all get inspiration at different points in time in
Yeah.
different ways. So, with Lights Camera Live, it obviously has evolved over time, right? You did the beta. The beta was basically sort of developing the course so that everyone could figure out how they develop their own show. This is like back pre StreamYard,
It was
pre.
like 2017. Yeah, this was like when Be Live was still like the cool thing, and then StreamYard came like a year after. This
It was
is
OBS. We were just.
OBS was originally my jam, and I always tell people it was like the IKEA of live streaming, and not in the sense that like you could have IKEA hacks, but more like here are your IKEA instructions. That's what
Yeah,
I mean.
yeah,
That's
I
what
would
I mean
agree.
by it. And then eventually I discovered Ecamm, and that was the difference that made the difference as far as like my production and also in helping my clients. But
Mm.
it was also very it's it's a subset of live streamers because Ecamm is only for Apple, right?
Right.
And so there was a point where I was like, I could, like I was juggling, do I teach Apple and PC users at the same time? And I just found from a teaching perspective, it took a lot more effort and time towards it. And PCs was just a whole different world. Like I'm great at spreadsheets. Like if you need me to like make a pivot table and whatnot, I could totally do that on a PC. But live streaming on it, I was like, Ecamm.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that. When you work with corporate clients, a lot of times you get stuck into that sort of PC world because of all their VPNs and everything else. And so you have to be on those types of machines. And I've always had to carry it as a separate computer. There was no way I was ever going to fully move from like Mac life to PC life. And I will tell you, I still have that thing around here somewhere, but I'm never digging it out unless I have to.
I mean, I have thought about getting just kind of like a simple PC, maybe like a simple laptop, just because TikTok Live, their
Mm,
live studio is only available on a PC. And I was like, they're that close to getting me to get a PC just for that. And it's simply because of the world of live shopping
mm.
has completely changed. And that's kind of like where I am now with Lights Camera
Yeah.
Live. Cause you've seen me at different stages in my business and the different things that I've been doing.
Yeah, let's talk about now. Let's
Yeah.
talk about the live shopping, which I think is really interesting, especially when we think about how technology is going and
Yeah.
avatars and where different countries are. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. So with Lights Camera Live, you and I had talked about the beta course that I created, which was really helping people create their own shows, which
Mhm.
at the time, you had to create your own graphics and all this other stuff. And now you have platforms like StreamYard or Restream, which makes it a lot easier. And not all users want to do what I would want to do in Ecamm, where it's like the graphics, the stingers, the this, the right, like really branded in that sense. And so I had to figure out like another revenue stream as far as what it is that I could do. And I think it was during the time of the pandemic when all of a sudden people are like, well, I still need to pitch
Mm.
to my investors, or I need to have an annual shareholders meetings, but I don't want it to be another boring Zoom meeting. And so I
Right.
found myself actually producing webinars
Mm.
and live stream events for clients.
Mm.
Like I would be in the back end, I wouldn't be on camera. And it was a way for me just to kind of coach them and say, like, okay, if you're going to say this, what are you going to say here? When you drop a promo code, how do you make
Right.
sure like they could actually see it and remember it? Right.
Right.
And so I started producing for clients. And then all of a sudden, the live shopping stuff started to creep up where like China was definitely, well, they still are, they're totally dominating that arena. And
Right.
so different live shopping platforms started to crop up. You used
Mhm.
to be able to do live shopping on Facebook, which when people called it home, they absolutely loved it. Right. But Facebook Meta has now completely changed
Right.
into different arenas.
Yeah.
And now I'm on different live shopping platforms producing for clients. And it's funny because these live shopping platforms will still tout and promote OBS. And again, not knocking OBS. I'm just saying if you're trying to introduce a client to the new world of live shopping and then you try to introduce them to OBS, the
Right.
amount of overwhelm and frustration is just on a whole nother level. And so these days, I coach clients as far as producing their shows, coaching their talents, saying this is how you repurpose your content, this is how you generate more sales. And then on that end, TikTok Live or TikTok Shop, I think it was maybe September of last year, like they blew up and it's
Yes.
more lo-fi as far as live streaming production. So even when I go live on TikTok, it's not this whole thing. It's very much just me on my phone and it's faceless live streaming. I'm just like pointing at a product. I'm like, hey, click on this now, go buy it. But I could actually go back to clients and say, hey, I did a 3 hour live stream. This is how much revenue I generated for this brand. If you're looking for a live shopping host, come pick me, right? And that's where I'm at now these days as far as Lights Camera Live, producing content for clients. It's UGC content, it's live streaming, it's all the things. I call it digital confetti.
Yes, digital confetti. I always loved that term. I loved it when you sort of coined that and came out with that. And so when you look at having your own business, right? It's you leave agency life, which I know we've sort of talked about today, but it is truly an exhausting like sort of work style, right? It's the endless, you're spending so much time pitching to get business, and how much effort actually goes into that, how much time you spend doing that. And then you go to a company. So most people who leave corporate America and they come to a business, I always make the joke of like, freedom in your business is like the freedom to work 80 hours instead of 40. But when you come from the agency life, you really sort of still have the um
The work
80-hour
ethic.
work. Yeah. And so sorry, excuse me.
You're good.
And so from that standpoint, um, what have you found has been like the biggest blessing in having your own business? Like, what is the thing that you've enjoyed the most?
Oh, I love this question, and it brings back memories. So I remember when I first left the agency, and my first client was a pharmaceutical company. And Elizabeth, I was like, oh, I'm going to charge them $100 an hour. I'm bawling. This is out of control. I was like, look at me. I'm such a baller. Right? but but what I loved most about it was that I got to choose my schedule. And Em and I, we would have this thing on Wednesdays, and we called it Whatever We Want Wednesdays. And these clients, I had already set these boundaries where I said, look, I have a little one, and on Wednesdays, I like to take a break. And she and I will go and do whatever she wants to do. Because if you really think about it, it was like Monday and Tuesday, I'm like working. Wednesday in the middle of the week, I got to just like slow down again and like build up that rapport. And then Thursday, Friday, I could work again. So that was like one of the things that I loved most about having a business for myself is putting boundaries around my schedule. Even now, I have clients that work in different time zones and even in different countries. And so I don't have to technically work in the mornings because when they're online, it's my afternoons. And so I could chat with them, or I could batch content in advance. I could spend the mornings really with my little one and have, like, now it's summer vacation, right? I could have breakfast and lunch. And then in the afternoons, she and I will just be like, all right, what do you want to do? You want to go to the water park? Do you want to do this? Da, 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 da. And I think that's the biggest blessing as far as having your business is that freedom, that time back to you. And like you said, you get to choose whether you want to work 40 or 80 hours a week. My schedule is very weird in the sense, no, well, not weird, but it's more like I work in pockets of time.
Right.
And I know like during what parts of my days where I'm super creative and I'm super productive. And I find that works out very well. Or like, I know like when I'm going to be a night owl and I need time to wind down. So I might as well just like draft something or edit something. Editing is probably my favorite. Edit I could do in the middle of the night. I'm just like, that's fine. But daylight is when I'm like, oh, it's magic hour. I have to create content. Like, do not bother me when it's like 6 to 7. Cause like when the sun hits here in San Diego, I'm like, ooh, this is the spot. This is like, I have to be here. Like, this is the only time. Like, I cannot recreate this magic hour in my content studio. So it's like, that's the time.
Yeah. And I mean, that is actually an industry term for anyone who has never heard that before. The magic hour, golden hour, all of
The golden
that.
hour, yeah.
Yeah, that specific time when the sun is not super bright and it's not down yet. And so I love that you've gone in this direction. I love that you have really sort of found that flexibility in your schedule, and you've been protective over it, which I think that a lot of us sometimes we have a hard time standing our ground because we think about, oh, well, like, what if they're not going to accept it? And, what if I'm not going to win this client this way? But I think that what you've shared today, I mean, no one had a problem with you.
No one had a
taking that
problem.
thing.
No. And I think it was more kind of like even one of my most recent clients, it was funny because she said to me, like, Stephanie, I would love to work with you. There's just one rule that I have is that if we work together, you're going to treat my business as if it's a part of your business. So you're going to just take it as seriously as I am because this is something that I built from the ground up. And I was like, I am the same exact way. Like when it's time for me to work, I'm going to work and I'm going to give you my best effort and all that other stuff. And so I was like, we were in the same mindset of,
Yeah.
I respect your business, your deadlines, and your campaigns. Same thing for me, right? When I'm feeling my best, when I have my rest and all the things, right? I'll create the best content and it works out just great. And I think even as an entrepreneur, obviously the biggest mistake is like, you're like, I'll take whatever client. And then that's when you see that like your boundaries are like, you give them your hand and they rip off your whole arm. You learn that the hard way sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think at this point, I think when you come to the table and when you're pitching your clients, you're just like, these are my values. This is my work ethic, right? If it's an absolute emergency, this is this. And I usually just tell them like, hey, I have a little one, she's going to school. So in the summertime, it might be a little weird, but I'm batching content, right?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think that what has been amazing, I think, over the last like 20 years, really since the internet really became the internet, is that
Yeah.
there have been all these really interesting sort of sub jobs that have come up, sub positions that have come up. And I don't mean sub in like a subpar way, but like in a more micro way of like you can actually build a business doing this one specific thing.
Oh yeah.
And I think that that's been really interesting. You used to have sort of like you had an office job, you had a factory job, you had a medical job, you know what I mean? Like they were very, very
Yeah.
specific things. And now there's like this nuance of like, the creator, even you can say you're a
The
creator.
creator is a whole different world. Yeah. There's this, have you seen that one meme when they're like, back in the day, people used to go to offices with no computers. What did they do? And I was like, what did I do? The first office job that I had with a computer, I was working at the San Diego Blood Bank, and I would dial people up and I would say, hey, we're low on your blood type. Can you come schedule an appointment? But before that, I was probably working at a Chinese restaurant. I was like, what would you like? You want half fried rice, half chow mein, some orange chicken, or like literally that was my first job. And I was like, what did people do if they weren't asking people for blood donations? I don't remember.
Well, I mean, it is crazy, right? I mean, computers used to be like the size of a room, for goodness sakes. And now we've got them in our pocket. I mean, our
Yeah.
phone is like a more powerful computer than I think we had even 10 years ago.
Yeah, I always tell people that like you literally have a mobile production studio in the palm of your hand. And okay, I haven't even told anyone this, but I was like, I want to see if I could just build a business with my smartphone. Just literally doing TikTok live shopping, edit it with the CapCut app on there, and then just send it and be like, this is how much I made from my phone. This is like the ROI that I'm getting from my phone. So
I
it's
love
been like a
that.
fun project.
Oh my gosh, please report back once you complete your case study because I bet you can make a lot just from your phone.
You
I mean,
absolutely can. And again, it depends on what kind of content you're creating, how you're promoting, and just the wherewithal as far as like the mindset, because it's one of those things where, as with any type of marketing, it's always going to be a test. You have to figure out what works and what doesn't work. But then you also have to figure out like, what are you willing to do?
mm,
Because for TikTok Live, like standard, you have to go live for at least 90 minutes. Most of the top performing live streamers will go live for about 3 to 4 hours.
oh,
And so you
interesting.
really have to make it worthwhile. Like when you think of like your run of show, and you know this because you've worked with me before, but your
Mm.
run of show is very different on a TikTok live versus, going live on YouTube or LinkedIn and all the other places.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I mean, absolutely the run of show, but it's also just sort of like attention span, it's like,
Yes.
people like to pop in and pop out and depending upon your type of content, it will keep their attention longer, or not, which, exactly how you have to build out things to know if they're actually working for you or not.
Hmm.
So, Stephanie, when we look at, sort of like the other side of starting a business, so it's always fun to look at like what the great parts are, right? Like, it allowed me to have flexibility. It allowed me to do whatever Wednesdays and all of that. But what was like the thing that you is like not the fun part, right? Like the thing you're like, oh gosh, yeah, this is like the thing I dread about having my business.
I would say the parts that are still like, oh, why does this take so long would be taxes.
Oh my gosh.
Just
Tell me
just
about
the
it.
whole the bookkeeping piece of it, and then working with my CPA, and then they always like to do extensions. So I'm like just holding on to like, I made this much, but I set aside 30%. Can you please do my taxes so I know whether or not like how much I actually have? That was the part that still gets me every year. And I don't know why. I mean, maybe I'm just in denial, but I always feel like, what? It's quarterly tax. Like we pay quarterly taxes. That's like the thing that always catches me. And then I'd say even before then, it's kind of like your contracts, making sure that your contracts are rock solid. I was very fortunate to find a lawyer who's just absolutely amazing. And he gave me like one of the best templates. And I always refer all of my friends over to him. He's great. I would say another pain point of just building your business was just like you can get caught up with shiny object subscriptions.
Oh, man.
Like, have you, like, when was the last time you did a subscription audit? You're like, do I really need all these things? Like, I finally came to the point where I was like, I don't need Adobe Acrobat. Like, I could literally do whatever it is that I have to do in Canva at this point, is basically where I'm at. And I was like, Canva does everything. Canva does this. It's, and it's just like you start to realize of all these
I'm
different
not trying to
subscriptions.
bring you back to Adobe, but I'm just going to tell you that, do you know that Adobe Express, you can now edit actual PDFs? It will actually ingest it. Side note.
I mean, I've been using Acrobat to edit my PDFs for the bookkeeping piece of it. And that was literally the only reason why I was using it, because I was no longer using Photoshop to make image edits. Like I was doing that in Canva.
Yeah. But I'm just saying Adobe Express is the same price as Canva. And it came out. That's actually a new feature they just came out with.
Fascinating. Yeah.
I'm not trying to force you back. I'm just saying, like,
No, it's good. It's good to know, because honestly, it's one of those things where, and this is why word of mouth marketing works, right? Because you don't know what it is that you don't know. And until someone says like, hey, have you heard of this thing? Have you tried this?
Yeah.
And you just saw it in real time. I'm like, well, my problem was, and if it solves that, then I'll look into it. Right. But if people are like, oh, and if it doesn't solve the problem that I'm like interested in, I'm just like, meh.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You asked about like the last time I did a software audit. Well, I will tell you, like, AI software is like the endless pit of subscription fees, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's like, well, you can use it for free. It's like, well, not really. Not really.
I mean, you can. It's just a matter of the workflow of it. Like I can learn how to change the oil in my car. I can. Do I want to? No.
No. It comes with getting dirty. It comes with having to have extra stuff. Yeah. 100%. 100%. So, Steph, what was the thing that when you started your business, you were like, oh my gosh, I did not expect that. Like that sort of surprising moment, that thing that just sort of took you off guard.
The thing that took me off guard. Oh, I'm trying to think back. Like I'm one of those people where I don't like really dwell on the negative. Like I put it far, far back in my unconscious.
It could be negative. It could be positive.
The thing that I guess not really threw me off, but the thing that I came to realize at a certain point was, you remember all those templates and frameworks that I was telling you about?
Yeah.
It was realizing that your knowledge doesn't just have to be a course. Like your course could be a VIP strategy day. Like some people don't want to spend 12 weeks on a course. They may just want to spend a day with you to get all the answers that they need. So that was like, oh, I learned that. That was really interesting. And then realizing you could repurpose that into a workshop. So it could be like a 3-hour or 4-hour workshop. And then realizing companies will pay you to teach their teams on how to do what it is that you do. That was like, wow. And so I think it's parts of your business where you've created these systems and frameworks, but you're only promoting it one certain way. And until you realize all the other different things you can do, it just opens up a world of opportunities.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful way of looking at it, and I love those insights. And it's interesting too. I mean, I think both of us are sort of like, we like to live in the future too. So I think sometimes looking back, I mean, you and I started my business in 2012, and you started yours in what year?
Like 2016, because she was born in 2015. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's funny to like even try to look back that far. Somebody was asking me something about when I started my business, and I was like, Oh my gosh, like, let me try to, like, get my Rolodex of my brain back out and see if I can roll back that far.
Who was I at that point?
Yeah,
I was excited, I was scared, and I was, like, let's try it, let's do this. And yeah, definitely signing up for trials of everything. Like, oh, what is this? What is that? Da, da, da. And then finally you iron out what your process is going to be, and
mhm,
then you test it out on clients. Yeah.
yeah. So I do want to just really briefly, because you have some really interesting things in your background, and one of those is your love of cosplay.
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I love that you do that. So can you talk a little bit I mean, it certainly helps that you're in San Diego and you certainly have Comic Con there, which is like the largest, comic book convention, I think, in the world, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it all started, well, basically, I've been going to Comic-Con since I was like 16, right? I way well past that number, but I had always gone, and I was always just fascinated by how these people would be so dedicated to celebrating their favorite sci-fi or their anime and all that other stuff. And then one day my brother-in-law really got into Star Wars. Well, they've always been into Star Wars, but he started to realize that you could cosplay as like a Star Wars um, character and whatnot. And so he would design like these cosplay builds where there was like a stormtrooper or Kylo Ren and all this other stuff. And one day he was basically like, Steph, do you want to be like a magma stormtrooper, which is basically like a red stormtrooper? And I was like, that's so cool. I'm going to call her Slay Trooper. And so there's like, maybe it was 2018. There was a summer where I spent like in his garage, just like filing it down and doing all this different stuff. And what I didn't realize though is that it's more than just cosplay in that sense, because we were a part of the 501st Legion. And the
Mhm.
501st Legion would do things like the Make a Wish Foundation. They would support these nonprofit organizations, and they would show up as like Star Wars and like the faces on these little kids. They were like, oh my gosh, it's Darth Vader and whatnot. And like you're standing there in your units. And I thought that was like the funnest thing to do. I haven't done a Comic Con as Slate Trooper probably for like the last 2 years or so, just because there's a lot of repairs that need to be done to that thing. The damage that I've done to it walking up and down those San Diego convention steps. But yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, I love that. And do you mind sharing? I just think that this is like a such an endearing. You had actually shared in your unique facts a little tiny story about when you actually went to get your business license. And I love the sentiment that you sort of ended that little story with. Do you mind sharing that?
Oh my God, I don't even know how you still remember this. I was like, I told you that. Literally, I don't think I tell most people this, but so I remember I was like, okay, so my pharmaceutical client, like, is this really a thing? Am I going to be really committed to doing it? And when I realized, like, yes, I was generating revenue, I was like, it's time for me to get like a business license. And at this time, my daughter was probably like 1 or something. And I was like, well, baby girl, you're going to come with me. And I was like, oh, this is like a big special moment. You're going to see mommy getting her business license and all that stuff. So she's walking with me hand in hand. I could still remember she had little feet. And I was like, come on, little girl, we gotta go. We gotta go. And so I remember standing in front of this clerk, and she's like reading off like the name of my company, and I had to sign it. And I was in the middle of like about to sign like my name and date it. And then this little girl, my little one, she's underneath the counter. She goes, mommy. And I go, what? She's like, I pooped. And I looked at her because I'm like, do I even have a diaper bag? Like I was like, when you're like so focused, like you're
Yeah,
doing like a task, and then someone like it was like the biggest pattern interrupt she could have ever done. And I was like, oh, well, you know what? Shit happens. And then I signed it. I signed the business license. Like, this is it. I'm committed to it at this point. Like I'm going to be balancing business and diaper bags at the same time. But that was pretty much it, where I was just like, well, shit happens. So
I
it
love
is
it
what it
so
is.
much. I love it so much. So, Steph, we talked at the beginning about how you're an author, and we've talked about, how you help build confidence in live streaming, how you help produce and help do live shopping. So, How does everybody find you and get in touch with you if they want to work with you?
Thank you. The best place to find me is obviously it's going to be LinkedIn. I find that LinkedIn is one of the best places for me to get to know what it is that you do, what your passions are, what your business, and like what your experience is.
Mhm.
And I find that most leads that I get from LinkedIn are much more serious as far as like working together. You can find me on Instagram these days, but it'll probably be like my daughter and I at a water park doing mommy things, right? But if you're more interested on the business side of stuff, like I'll tell you all the things I learned at VidCon and this and that.
Excellent. I love how you dropped that in because I'm certainly anxious and excited to hear about that. And then are your books available on Amazon or how do people get you?
Yes, both of them. So the first one is the Ultimate Guide to Social Media Marketing. That's the first edition, but I will tell you this, we're already working on the second edition. So maybe just hold out
Mhm.
until next year. And then the second book that I released is also available on Amazon. It's the Ultimate Guide to Influencer Marketing. That to me is so near and dear to my heart simply because of the fact that it was my co-author and I, and a lot of my friends, they are budding content creators that want to be entrepreneurs, that want to work with the agencies. And coming from the agency side, I could very much be like, this is what agencies are looking for. So it's kind of like, these are the answers to your test. Like, if you want to know what agencies want, this is what they're looking for. If you want to work with these content creators, these are the ones that you need to research and work very well with. And PS, by the way, it's still TikTok live. Like I'm just gonna throw that out there. If you're looking for sales, seriously, the amount of people I see crushing it on there, they're like, hey, I just made $30,000 in revenue for this client. I'm like, wow, what did you do?
Yeah, it's amazing. I think it's been amazing to sort of see how there are really like almost no barriers to being able to do that as long as you're a good creator, right? A good consistent creator. It's been a really interesting change in the market.
There's so much, especially with live shopping. And for those of you that are even just shy being on camera, there are people that are crushing it and not even showing their faces on camera. They're just pointing at the product behind the screen and they're crushing it, like absolutely crushing. Fun fact, I found that when I do TikTok live shopping, me being on camera versus me being faceless, I make more money being faceless, which is hurtful.
Wild.
Which is, first of all, it's hurtful, but then it's also kind of nice because then I don't have to like get all dolled up. But still, I was just like, oh, okay. Humbled.
That is it's wild because
It is.
it's yeah, I have no idea why that is other than maybe it just is like less distracting, right? It's like
I don't
really
know.
dialed in
I
on the
just think, again, as a marketer, you test what it is that you test and you see what works. And
yeah.
I could always take that feedback and share it with clients. I'm like, look, listen, you don't have to pay for models or live streamers or any of that stuff. You just need someone who's really good with their script, can get them to click on the product and buy right then and there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. So, Stephanie, is there anything else that we didn't talk about today that you would want to share with our audience?
I will say this. Being a woman and being an entrepreneur, one thing that's very, very helpful to have, other than a good CPA and a bookkeeper and a lawyer, is you want to have a strong circle of friends that understand what it is that you're doing, that understand the emotional roller coaster when it comes to building a business,
Right.
becoming brave on camera,
Yeah.
being okay with some friends might not liking your social media content because they're not your clients anyway, right? Or just having friends that understand that there are peaks and valleys in your business where you're in launch mode and you're just like you're not talking to anyone, and that's okay, and they're not going to feel butthurt that you haven't talked to them for a while because they know you've been busy. And then when you come up for air, they celebrate you. And I think those are definitely things to be mindful of when you're running a business and you're being an entrepreneur. It could be very lonely. Like honestly, like when someone says to me, like, "Hey, like, I have business friends, I have client friends, and then I have friends who are still friends, but they don't understand what it is that I do in here." I think when you're an entrepreneur, keep making friends, keep building different support circles,
Mhm.
right? You never know, like when you'll need like a resource or relationship to lean on. And I just think that when you can find like a support group where they'll listen to you,
Mm.
you can lean on them
Mhm.
and they know how to lift you up, then that's going to be very helpful for you, especially if you really want to take your business and start growing it to whatever it is that you want to.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you you've sort of dovetailed into that because it leads perfectly into my very last question, which is, if you had one word or a short phrase that you would give to a woman looking to start or grow her business, what would that be?
Resilient. You have
Ooh,
to be resilient, because oftentimes you'll plan things out in your head, and oftentimes you could hold on to this vision so much. Well, it didn't turn out the way that I want it to be. And I feel like sometimes letting go of what you thought it should be and just embracing on what it's becoming or what's unfolding in front of you, and just having faith in the universe that the universe has a bigger plan than you do. Right? Like, there are times where I'm just kind of like, okay, universe, I thought it should have worked out this way and it completely blew up in my face. I'm expecting that you have a better plan for me and it's going to unfold in a better way. Maybe this will turn into a funny story, just like the one at the clerk. And just be resilient. Keep bouncing back. Every step that you take is always going to be another lesson. I always tell people that there is no failure, only feedback. Fail is your first attempt in learning. And I think if you are resilient, then you'll be successful. You'll keep going through it.
yeah. I think that's really, I think you've said a couple really insightful and important things, right? One is making sure you have a good support system. It's like when you have a startup, the sort of litmus test is always this, especially if you have co-founders, is one person always needs to believe, and that's basically what separates you between closing the company and keeping the company open. Once everybody doesn't believe, then the company's done, right? And when you think about having a business by yourself, you need other people to sort of help you be that litmus test, because there are days when it's hard. It's really hard. And you think like, gosh, it'd be easier maybe if I did go back and work for someone else, or,
And
it's
I did that. And I will tell you, that's another lesson learned there, girl. I was just like, it's a different, I will say one thing. When you're an entrepreneur and you run your own business, you know your work ethic and you know your drive, kind of like what I was telling you before, right? Like, clients come to you because they understand your work ethic. And I found that one time that I decided to like go into that and work in-house, people don't always have the same drive. There are some
right,
people that are just there for a paycheck.
right.
They're just there for tenure. And from an entrepreneurial spirit where you're like, hey, let's test it, like it's a different mindset for real. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say.
Long and short of it is, have a good support system so you don't do things like that. I think, I always talk about it as like a house cat, wild cat, right? Like, most
Yeah.
entrepreneurs are wildcats. They're just not meant to be a house cat that sort of like goes to the same place. And you know what I mean? Like, we're just very different
Yeah.
animals. Yeah. So Stephanie, I'm so honored that you joined me here today. Thank you so much for sharing all of your secrets that
Oh my God, you knew them. I was like, oh my God, she went into the vault. So I was like, wow, she's really been paying attention. It's sometimes it's those things where I'm like, did I say this on a show? Like, when did I reveal this? Because live streaming is so much fun because you could just be an open book. Because sometimes you're just like, will people listen to the whole entire thing? But when people do, I'm like, oh my God, like, you picked that up. Like, okay.
well, I mean, we've known each other a long time, and
Yeah.
I've always tried to be a good listener. But
And you've
so
always
thank
been a great supporter too. And I really
you.
appreciate that. You're amazing.
Oh my gosh, it's been my absolute pleasure, and I'm so thankful that you've been here with us today. I'm so thankful for all of our listeners who have joined us as well, and it's really been an absolute pleasure bringing you the uniquely inspiring stories that ignite female entrepreneurs into action. I've been your host, Elizabeth Goede, and on behalf of all the awe-inspiring women entrepreneurs out there, I encourage you to not only dream big, but to ignite those dreams into action. Remember, every spark can lead to an extraordinary fire. So keep the spark alive for today, tomorrow, and the vibrant future beyond. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to never miss a spark. Until next time, stay ignited.